Admiral Zixthera adjusted her ceremonial battle crown and gazed through the viewport of her flagship, the inevitable Dominion. The massive dreadnought stretched 12 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull bristling with plasma cannons that could crack moons. Around her, the combined fleet of the hegemony floated in perfect formation, 3,000 vessels representing the combined might of 17 starfaring civilizations. "Ma'am," her tactical officer chirped through his translator unit. "The humans have responded to our ultimatum." "Already? How refreshingly prompt of them." Zixthera's forearms folded across her chitinous chest as she turned from the viewport. "I assume they're surrendering?" The tactical officer's antennae twitched, a sign of nervousness among his species. "Not exactly, Admiral. They're sending a fleet to meet us." Zixthera's mandibles clicked in amusement. For 3 centuries, the hegemony had swept across this spiral arm of the galaxy, incorporating species after species into their empire. Some joined willingly, seduced by promises of prosperity and protection. Others required more forceful persuasion. The humans, those upstart primates who had only discovered faster-than-light travel a mere 50 years ago, clearly fell into the latter category. "How large is this fleet of theirs?" she asked, already anticipating the answer would provide. Excellent entertainment for her crew. 47 vessels, ma'am." The bridge erupted in chittering, buzzing, and various other expressions of mirth from the dozen species represented among her crew. Zixthera herself couldn't suppress a deep, rumbling laugh that echoed through her thorax. 47 ships against 3,000? She wiped a tear from one of her compound eyes. These humans certainly have courage. Misguided, suicidal courage, but courage nonetheless. "Should we prepare the surrender broadcast equipment?" asked her communications officer. "Oh yes, definitely. I suspect we'll be using it very soon." Zixthera settled back into her command throne, already composing the victory report she'd send to the Hegemony Council. "Put their fleet on the main screen when they arrive. I want everyone to see this." The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace, exactly on schedule, their ships materializing in perfect formation just outside the asteroid belt of this contested system. Zixthera leaned forward, studying the enemy vessels with professional interest. They were small, laughably small. The largest appeared to be no more than 2 kilometers in length, a mere sixth the size of her flagship. Most were even smaller, sleek vessels that looked more like oversized fighters than proper warships. Their hulls were an odd matte black color that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Well?" Zixthera called to her sensor operator. "What's their weapons configuration?" "That's so strange, Admiral. I'm detecting minimal energy signatures. No massive plasma arrays, no graviton cannons, no planet cracker torpedoes. They appear to be armed with kinetic weapons?" The bridge fell silent. Kinetic weapons were primitive, the kind of armament used by species who hadn't yet mastered energy manipulation on a stellar scale. It was like bringing a stone axe to a nuclear war. "Open a channel to their flagship," Zixthera commanded, her voice dripping with condescension. "Let's see if we can talk sense into them before we vaporize them." The main screen flickered to life, revealing the bridge of the human command vessel. The species was even more primitive-looking than Zixthera had imagined, bipedal mammals with only 2 arms and laughably few sensory organs. The human commander was a graying male wearing a simple blue uniform, devoid of the elaborate decorations that denoted proper military rank. "I am Admiral Zixthera of the Hegemony Combined Fleet," she announced, her translator rendering her words in the crude human language. "You are vastly outmatched and outgunned. Surrender now, and your species will be incorporated peacefully into our empire." The human admiral's lips curved upward in what their species called a smile, an expression Zixthera had learned usually indicated pleasure or amusement. How odd, considering their hopeless situation. "Admiral Zixthera," the human replied, his voice calm and steady. "I'm Admiral Chen of the Terran Defense Force. I'm afraid we must respectfully decline your generous offer." "You realize you're outnumbered 63 to 1? Sixathera gestured to the tactical display showing the vast disparity in fleet sizes. We are aware of the odds, Chen nodded. But there's something you should know about humans, Admiral. We've never been particularly good at math. Before Sixathera could respond, Chen raised his hand and made a simple gesture, a closed fist, that opened into a spread palm. The human fleet vanished. For a moment, Sixathera thought they had retreated. Then her sensor operator's panicked voice filled the bridge. Admiral, they're everywhere, all around us. The main screen split into dozens of feeds as the human ships materialized throughout the hegemony formation. Not in front of it, not beside it, within it. The small vessels had somehow bypassed every sensor, every defensive screen, every early warning system, and positioned themselves mere kilometers from individual hegemony ships. Impossible, Sixathera whispered. No one can micro-jump with that precision. The computational requirements alone. Her words were cut off, as space suddenly blazed with light. The human ships opened fire simultaneously, but these weren't the primitive kinetic weapons her sensors had detected. Lances of coherent energy, more focused and intense than anything in the hegemony arsenal, reached out to touch her vessels. The results were catastrophic. Hegemony shields designed to withstand the most powerful weapons known to galactic civilization simply ceased. The energy beams passed through them as if they weren't there, boring perfectly circular holes, through armor plating that could shrug off direct hits from stellar bombs. Ma'am, her damage control officer screamed over the alarms. The stellar crusher is gone, so is the inevitable victory. The entire third battle group just... His report was interrupted by another wave of fire from the human fleet. More hegemony vessels died, their reactors failing in brilliant flares that lit up the darkness between the stars. Return fire, Sixathera roared, but her weapons officer was already shaking his head. We can't get a lock, Admiral. Their ships are moving too fast, changing position faster than our targeting computers can track. On the screen, Admiral Chen's expression hadn't changed. He still wore that same calm smile, as if the systematic destruction of the galaxy's most powerful fleet was merely an interesting diversion. You see, Admiral Sixathera, he said conversationally, your intelligence was correct about one thing. We humans are relatively new to space warfare. We've only been at it for 50 years. Another wave of human fire swept through the hegemony fleet. The inevitable Dominion shuddered as something punched through her forward armor. But we've been perfecting warfare itself for over 10,000 years, Chen continued. And there's one lesson we learned very early in our history. It's not the size of the dog in the fight that matters. It's the size of the fight in the dog. The human ship suddenly accelerated, moving at velocities that should have been impossible for vessels of their size. They wove through the hegemony formation like a school of predatory fish, each vessel striking with surgical precision before vanishing again. Sixathera watched in horrified fascination as her mighty fleet, the accumulated power of 17 civilizations, was systematically dismantled by these primitive mammals and their impossibly advanced technology. How? She whispered, her voice barely audible over the sounds of her ship dying around her. Chen heard her somehow. You assumed our weapons were primitive because we use kinetic energy. You were half right. We do use kinetic energy. The kinetic energy of accelerated exotic matter moving at 99.9% the speed of light. You assumed our ships were small because they looked small. You didn't account for the fact that most of each vessel exists in folded space-time. The tactical display showed the truth of his words. The human fleet was no longer 47 ships, it was 47,000. Each vessel deploying hundreds of additional units from pocket dimensions. You assumed we were new to war because we're new to space. Chen's voice continued as Sixathera's flagship lost power and began to drift. But Admiral, we've been fighting each other since before we discovered fire. We've turned violence into an art form, warfare into a science, and conflict into poetry. As the last of the hegemony fleet fell silent, Admiral Chen leaned forward slightly, his smile never wavering. Welcome to Earth's tiny fleet, Admiral. Population, everyone who thought humans would be easy prey. The screen went dark, leaving Zix Thara alone with the echoes of burning space and the bitter taste of a lesson learned far too late. In the end, it hadn't been the size of Earth's fleet that mattered. It had been the size of humanity's refusal to kneel.